Welcome to New York's #2 sports show. The New York Giants season mercifully comes to an end. They lose to the Philadelphia Eagles by a score of 20-13, finishing out the year at 3-14. So it could have been worse. I think there's still, going to be that sting from winning against the Colts, and we'll discuss the ramifications of that. But if the Giants had won this game against the Eagles, they would have dropped to 6. By losing, it's 3. So let's first discuss, and what's really more important, well, a couple of things. I guess let's start it out with Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll discourse. So it seems like the most likely outcome is that Joe Schoen returns, which I disagree with. If it were me, I would basically be done with Joe Schoen as GM of the Giants. But it seems as if John Mara is going to stick with him. Because nothing's confirmed, and I don't know that we'll know. Black Monday, is known for a lot of dismissals around the league. It doesn't seem like we'll know one way or another exactly at that point. I think that, you figure within the next week, there'll be confirmation. But my expectation is that probably both of them will be back. And if Joe Schoen is back, then I think Brian Daboll should be as well. And again, if it were me, my preference would be that both would be fired. I think that would be the direction to go in. This is way too important a draft to fuck around. And I don't think that you can trust Joe Schoen, considering the track record and just how bad it's been. It isn't the absolute worst case scenario. If Schoen comes back and Daboll is fired, that is the definite worst case scenario. That is a bad move to not have your GM and coach on the same cycle. And what it does is, if they bring in a new head coach for Schoen's going to be here for at least 2 more seasons if you do that. Whereas if you run it back, they really only have 1 year to prove themselves, which again, I don't even think that's the right way to do it, but we'll see. If there is any firings, I'll certainly do an episode. If both are retained, I don't believe I will. Because again, for me right now, that's my expectation. I think they'll both be back. It's not the worst case scenario, but it's not good. Joe Schoen is very fortunate to still have a job. And this isn't even me necessarily defending Brian Daboll. That's how it goes. The head coach just falls in line with the GM typically. And so it's kind of simple for me. If Schoen is fired, then obviously Daboll goes and, just as well. But if he stays, then you got to keep the head coach. You just have to. Who would want to be part of this? What good, high quality head coach are you getting for a hot seat GM? And with no definite quarterback in the mix. So that leads me to the next point. And this may end up working itself out, right? It's possible. And so I don't want it to be all doom and gloom, but it sucks that and let's discuss the different variables here. In a year where there are 2 quarterbacks that would be drafted high enough, presumably 1 and 2, in Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. Now, look, they may both or one end up not being very good. And it seems as if, if you were to throw them into last year's draft, they would be more in that J.J. McCarthy, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, like that area of the draft, a.k.a. more so not part of that top 3 of Williams, Daniels, and May, right? So it's important to just say that. But it's interesting. So the Titans are picking first. So going into today, the Patriots were the ones that are the number 1 pick, but they won. Now, they already have Drake May. And the one benefit that would have come from the Patriots retaining the number 1 pick would have been that you could have traded with them, you had them as a trade partner to move up and go get your quarterback. The good news, though, is that they win, and so the Giants move ahead of them. The Giants move up from 4 to 3. But number 1 is the Titans, and they are certainly going to draft a quarterback. There's just no question, right? Will Levis, as a second-round pick, did not work out in his 2 seasons with Tennessee. The number 2 pick is the Cleveland Browns, and that's where things get way more interesting. They do have Deshaun Watson and a really, really bad cap situation, so it is no guarantee that they will take one of Sanders or Ward, whoever doesn't get taken by the Titans. I would think that I think it's in their best interest to still go after the quarterback. But that is one that I think is going to be not a no-brainer. I think it could go either way. And so, but the Browns could also trade down if they choose to not get a quarterback. And let's say they don't love like Travis Hunter, who by a lot of accounts is the top non-quarterback prospect. And with him, he's a two-way player, very rare, where offense and defense, wide receiver and corner. So it's risky. There's no question about that. And I could see someone saying, hey, like, you just got to bet on the talent. And, it's a rarity to find something like that. But I could also see someone saying, hey, this could be a gimmicky type of player that maybe is really good at both positions, but in the NFL, you just can't maintain that. There's Abdul Carter from Penn State that could be interesting. We'll get into that, more of that stuff later on. But what do the Browns do? And they could trade down, maybe to the Giants. The Giants would move up one spot. That's possible. So I think when all is said and done, see, it's really tough to say. It all depends on the Browns. If they're dead set on getting a quarterback, then the Giants kind of are shit out of luck in terms of getting one of those two QBs. If they're not, though, if it comes out that the Browns don't take a quarterback, my guess is either via trade up one spot or just at pick number 3, the Giants will take a quarterback. So hope isn't lost, but to go from potentially the number 1 pick to the number 3 pick, it makes things a lot more difficult. It would have been a much more simpler decision, one in which maybe it is a blessing in disguise that you may not get one of those two QBs and maybe they don't pan out to be great. But it would have been nice to at least have the ability to just do the scouting, go through the whole evaluation process and make an informed decision. And also with the number 1 pick, there's less of a chance that Shane fucks it up. Like, he could have stumbled his way into a quarterback. Now you have to get real creative. And like, you may have to take someone that isn't a quarterback. And then that's where, to me, it gets really tough in terms of like, because I don't know. Travis Hunter, to me, like, when you look at mock drafts, he is the one that is typically the top guy besides Sanders and Ward. But I like, he is a different type of player than we've ever seen before. So I don't know. But that's kind of the summary of, again, Shane and Daboll. I think they'll both be back. Definitely Shane will be. I think that's a bad decision by John Mara. And the Giants are picking 3rd. So it's going to make for a very, very interesting offseason heading into the draft and what's going to happen. That's for sure, right? Because there's a lot of ways this can go down. I wish the Giants had the number 1 pick, but I'm trying not to be completely devastated by it, even though I think that it was, a really, really bad win versus the Colts. There's just, if nothing else for draft capital, having the number 1 pick would have been a really good thing. Let's try to discuss this game. It's kind of crazy that I'm even going to try to go through it. So the Eagles really benched all their starters, and yet they still beat the Giants. And I go back to, like, the Colts, like, how they gave up 45 points to the Giants last week is one of the strangest, oddest things you'll ever see. But Tanner McKee, the 3rd string quarterback for the Eagles, so not Jalen Hurts, not Kenny Pickett, but Tanner McKee, really did a pretty nice job for the Eagles. 27 for 41, 269 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's what they did. They really didn't run with any success. It was a combination of Kenneth Gainwell and Will Shipley, who didn't do much on the ground. But the Eagles were good in terms of just getting the ball out there and finding open receivers. And Jahan Dotson, who a former Washington Commander, he had a pretty good game going 7 for 94. Dallas Goedert, who had been hurt, he played early on in the game to get some reps in. 4 catches, 55 yards for him. On the Giants side, Drew Lock, just nothing really. 22 for 29, 138 yards, 1 touchdown, and a pick. And we'll go through it. I think the pick was kind of somewhat equivalent to a punt, if I remember correctly, but I'll have to check that. Tyrone Tracy Jr. had a couple of nice runs. He was all right. 14 for 59, nothing crazy. And Malik Neighbors breaks the Giant record for receptions in a season with 109, surpassing it was Steve Smith, who I believe in 2009 at 108 had that record. So good on Malik Neighbors. I believe Brock Bowers ended up with more receptions than Neighbors. I assume that Brock Bowers played more games than Malik Neighbors, though. Neighbors missed 2 games. He missed the Seahawk game and the Bengal game. So in terms of like, oh, there's one more game in the regular season than there used to be, which I agree. Like that does change some of these stats, these records. But Malik Neighbors missed 2 games. He only played 15 games. So a really impressive year for him. He ends up with, I think, around 1,200 yards, 7 touchdowns, which was kind of a product of like that could have easily been more. It's just, when you're not on the good team, it's going to be tougher to do that. Wan'Dale Robinson's stat line. I mean, if this is not so Wan'Dale Robinson, I don't know what else is. 10 catches for 43 yards. That is insane. How the fuck does that happen? A long of 9 on 11 targets. Crazy. Darius Slayton ends up with no catches on 1 target. He really, Daniel Jones not being around really hurt Darius Slayton. And Slayton's going to be a free agent coming up. The more I think about it, like I think Darius Slayton is someone that's kind of slept on by Giant fans. He's one of the longest tenured guys. I mean, him and Dexter Lawrence have been around the longest at this point. But you almost wonder, actually, I think he'd be good with, a more competent quarterback than Drew Lock, Tommy DeVito. But the numbers took a big, big nosedive after Daniel Jones. Those two always had a great connection. And yeah, not a whole lot else to say. In terms of some of the numbers, Kayvon Thibodeau gets a sack and a half. Brian Burns with a half sack. So those accounted for the 2 Giant sacks. But Kayvon Thibodeau with, I was rooting for the Giants to lose, so I didn't mind it. But Kayvon Thibodeau, we'll get there. A terrible, terrible roughing the passer penalty at the end of the game that really kind of made the Giants' task of winning near impossible. And Thibodeau's done that. Thibodeau, in his 3-year career, has taken penalties at unopportune times. I guess I'll talk on the Eagles real quick. The Eagles, the playoffs are set. Eagles are going to be preparing for a matchup with the Green Bay Packers. I think it's a tough first-round matchup. It's a good 7 seed in Green Bay. Jordan Love did get hurt for the Packers, so I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming he'll be good to go, but that's obviously a factor. But, Saquon Barkley will be playing in his 3rd playoff game. He played 2 with the Giants in 2022. Actually, his 2nd game in Philly, because the Giants did lose to the Eagles by a lot in that NFC divisional round game in 2022. But no Saquon Barkley in this game. He had a chance to break Eric Dickerson's single-season rushing record, but they chose to rest him, which I think was a sensible move by Philly. Look, like, I'm sure for him, deep down, he probably wanted it, but they got bigger things going on. So he broke the 2,000. The fact that I think if maybe he had somehow been less than 2,000 yards, maybe they would have tried to at least get him that, but he achieved it last week. So let's discuss this game about as quickly as I ever could. So Giants get the ball first. They don't score. Tyrone Tracy, it was a lot of, the Giants were really running the ball a lot. They didn't pass it much in this game. It was a very bland, vanilla game plan today. And again, just not much to show for it. But there was a false start by Jay Kubas. I guess I'll say injuries-wise, they were pretty beat up on the line. John Michael Schmitz was out. Evan Neal was out. I believe Tyree Phillips actually might have been the starting right tackle. I think he was. I know he was active, and I think he was starting. And so pretty amazing comeback for him to come back from injury. And, he always seems to find his way into the Giant roster. And the rest of the line was some combination of Illuminor, Stinney, Van Roten in the middle, and Kubas right guard is probably the way it lined up. But yeah, so the offensive line was pretty taxed. Not Wan'Dale Robinson stuff that doesn't really do anything here. Giants ultimately punted away. Sorry, that's not true. The Giants don't punt it away. They go for it on 4th and 7 at the 49. And it's an incomplete pass from Drew Lock to Darius Slayton. So the Eagles get the ball for the first time of the game, and they make quick movement. 4 plays, 51 yards. Tanner McKee finding Dallas Goedert for a 16-yard pass to start it out, then a 17-yard catch for Goddard, and then a 15-yard touchdown for Aniyah Smith to give the Eagles a 7-0 lead. Then the Giants go 3-and-out after a out of bounds kickoff by the Eagles, but it didn't matter. Giants go 3-and-out. Then the Eagles get the ball back. They move it. Again, Goddard being involved, Jahan Dotson. There'd be a neutral zone infraction penalty on Drew Phillips, which is a pretty bad penalty. 4th-and-1 at the Eagle 36. And I don't know at the time if they were necessarily just trying to draw the Giants off, or they may have been going for it. Knowing Philly, they probably actually were. But Drew Phillips, again, neutral zone infraction. And John Dotson makes a catch into Giant territory. We go to the second quarter. There would be a first down conversion on a 4th down play from McKee to Goddard. And the Eagles ultimately were settling for a field goal chance that was missed by Jake Elliott. 39-yard field goal goes wide left. So, of course, Jake Elliott, when it counts, you'd be sure that he'd make the field goal versus the Giants. In this type of game, when you want him to kick it, he misses it. So the score remains 7-0. Then a long, drawn-out drive by the Giants that doesn't amount to anything. It's a 12-play, 37-yard drive worth 7 minutes and 15 seconds. That's hard to do. And there was actually a fake punt, a direct snap to Dane Belton on a 4th-and-3 at 36. So a little bit of creativity that, again, you wouldn't see that in a meaningful game, but they pull it out in this game, and Belton gets the first down on a 10-yard run. So then after that, another 4th-and-1 situation where Devin Singletary is able to break a tackle and get the first down. And eventually it's a 4th-and-2 spot at the Eagle 34. Giants go for it, and it's an incomplete pass from Locke to Malik Neighbors. So a couple of times where the Giants turn it over on downs. Eagles get the ball, and they are able. It started out poorly. There was I guess Nick Gates actually was the center for the Eagles. A bad snap, possibly, or something along those lines. And the Eagles lose like 14 yards, but they're able to work it pretty quickly. And Dotson, on a 3rd-and-15, gets a 19-yard catch. Let's see here. Will Shipley with a 13-yard reception. Will Shipley with another 13-yard reception. And after the 2-minute warning, the Eagles eventually settle for 3. 4th-and-5 at the Giants 6, and it's Jake Elliott for a 24-yard field goal. Then the Giants go 3-and-out. They punted away, and the Eagles actually did try, surprisingly, up 10-0. They tried to move the ball a bit. But once they got it into Giant territory, 3 straight incomplete passes, and they punted away. So Eagles are up 10-0 at half. We're halfway there. And so it starts out the third quarter where the Eagles have the ball. And the Eagles were the Eagles were in control for most of this game, but we'll get to a point eventually where there were chances for the Giants to make this really interesting, but didn't. The Eagles, they go for it. They got a really good kickoff return to start. Rodgers with a good kickoff return to start the half. Already at the Giant 43 to start it out, but on a 4th-and-2, McKee to Smith is incomplete. Not a great play right there. And so the Giants get the ball and they get their first points of the game. They settle for a field goal. Tyrone Tracy with a 16-yard run. Chris Manhertz with a 16-yard reception, a rare reception for Manhertz. But they don't, they're not able to convert. They don't get the touchdown. Graham Gano, 25-yard field goal for him. Could this be Graham Gano's last game as a Giant? I think that's probably possible. And a lot of others as well, not just him. But that makes it 10-3. Then the Eagles do go 3-and-out, and it ended with a sack by Kayvon Thibodeau to end the drive. A good punt by the Eagles, and the Giants don't have good field position. Giants go 3-and-out here. Wandale Robinson with a couple of receptions there for not a whole lot. And the Eagles get the ball back at their own 39, and from the third quarter to the fourth quarter, they're able to score. And a mix, mixing things around. Again, a lot of Jahan Dotson. And ultimately, the first play out of the fourth quarter is a touchdown to E.J. Jenkins, who is a backup, maybe third-string tight end. He's able to get a 7-yard touchdown on it was a 2nd-and-3 play at the Giants 7. So 17-3, looking like this game is basically going to be all about over. So I guess Chris Hubbard, I'm seeing that Chris Hubbard reported as eligible. I guess Hubbard was that next guy. Josh Azudu, I think he might have gotten some, I don't even know. Azudu might have gotten some reps. They totally mismanaged Josh Azudu. That was a high 3rd-round pick that has been an absolute disaster. But anyway, this game was basically close to being done, but you have one more Malik Neighbors moment. 3rd and 8 at the Eagle 45, and it's a lock deep shot to Neighbors, which is a touchdown. Neighbors, a nice catch, able to stay in bounds and gets the touchdown to make it 17-10. So one of the very few bright spots, Malik Neighbors had a great rookie season. And now the Eagles get the ball back, and they actually do go 3 and out. And that's where you get a sack, half sack by Thibodeau, half sack by Burns to end the drive. So all of a sudden, Giants have the ball down 7 with a little less than 9 minutes to go. And so I'm seeing Josh Ezeudu false start. So I probably have the alignment a little bit off. Ezeudu probably played more than I realized, I guess. Anyway, it is a false start by Ezeudu. You get a false start by Van Roten. So even though the Giants, so they started with really good field position. Smith-Marset with a nice return. So that's the thing. Giants down by 7 with the ball at the Eagle 38. But due to those false starts and incompetence, Graham Gano ends up connecting on a 53-yard field goal. So Gano, who returned from injury, like kind of it's hard to describe Gano. Like he didn't get many chances. He was hurt for a while, but I guess all in all, he still was okay. But again, I don't think that, with his contract being what it is, I'd be kind of surprised if he's back next year, but we'll see. So then it makes it 17-13. Eagles get the ball, and they get a couple of third down conversions when they needed to. And it ends up in a spot at the 2-minute warning, 4th and 3 at the Giant 41. At this point, the Giants have all 3 timeouts left. And Boogie Basham goes offside. Neutral zone infraction on a 4th and 3 at the 41. Just an absolutely boneheaded move by Basham. I mean, seriously, like if you're Brian Daboll, who's looking to win games, that's a really bad move. So then Gainwell -1 yards, Giant timeout. McKee incomplete to Gainwell. And then it's McKee to Smith for 5 yards, but this is where Kayvon Thibodeau goes roughing the passer. So this would have put the Eagles in a spot where, I don't know, I guess you go with an Elliott field goal chance, and the Giants would have had a lot of time left. The Giants would have presumably called their second timeout, but that doesn't happen. So now it lets the Eagles chew off more clock. And Gainwell gets runs that don't do much. Ultimately, the Giants burn all their timeouts, and Elliott hits a 32-yard field goal with like 47 seconds left to make it 20-13. So the Basham neutral zone infraction and also the Thibodeau roughing the passer, huge penalties that really cost the Giants any realistic chance of coming back. So, the interception by Drew Lock happens at the end of the game. Lock to Bellinger for 4 yards out of bounds. Lock to Gray for 4 yards out of bounds. And it's 3rd and 2 at the Giant 38. 36 seconds left. It's Lock intended for Jalen Hyatt, who has been an absolute total disappointment. And Sidney Brown is able to intercept it. And that seals the game and ends the season. But Jalen Hyatt, like, that's just another really bad draft pick. I don't have any high hopes for Jalen Hyatt. Not at all. I don't think he should be part of any plans. Like, Giants should be doing whatever they need to at receiver. Jalen Hyatt should not be part of that thought process. Honestly, Isaiah Hodgins, who was on the practice squad, he would have been a more useful player than Hyatt by a mile. So, yeah, Giants season ends 3-14. An embarrassing, awful season that was not that couldn't even be satisfying by the Giants getting the number 1 pick. They end up with a number 3 pick, and it looks like there's not going to be a regime change. So close to a full-on disaster. But now, the focus for me goes to that pick. What is going to happen? You kind of know what the Titans are going to do. It's a matter of which QB it's going to be. And the Browns, that's kind of like the big thing. Do they take a QB? Do they take a non-QB? Do they trade down? We'll find those things out. So I'll report and make an episode if there is a change with Shane and or Daboll. I'm not expecting it to be. Certainly not with Shane and John Mara. It's just he's incompetent as an owner. I hate to say it. He just is. And I don't see things getting a whole lot better for the Giants in future years. All you can do is hope. But that's tough. So the 2024 season is over. The Giants finish at 3-14 as they close the year out in Philly. They lose to the Eagles' backups by a score of 20-13.